Continuous improvement comes in lots of different flavors and styles. I'm Bella Engelbach, and I'm inviting you to journey with me to the edges of lean. Episode 87, Continuously Improving Your Knowledge Management with Dr. Cindy Young. Every time we use our lean practices to define and solve a problem, we create knowledge. How can we improve our organizational recognition and management of all that newly created knowledge, which is key to not having the same problem occur again? It turns out that knowledge management itself requires a process and continuous improvement, and Dr. Cindy Young is here to share her insights. Welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here finally after all of our technology problems.
We did have a couple of technology problems getting started, but we're good to go now.
Yes.
So Cindy, tell us about Cindy. You've had a very interesting career, so let us know what it is that you've done and what you're doing now.
Well, I started off, the standard stuff you do when you're a teenager, and then I joined the military. So I was in the Navy for 23 years. I was enlisted first for 8.5 years. I became a surface warfare officer. And a surface warfare officer takes care of people on ships. And I eventually ended my career after 23 years. My last ship, I had probably about 100 people on me. It's not a lot, but considering everything they do on the ship, it's a lot. All the weapon systems and everything we do I was responsible for the Aegis weapon system, for all the guns, and all the people that support me to make sure that we could get back home safely and accomplish all of our missions. And then I got to shore duty and I eventually retired out of Virginia Beach. So then I've become a contractor. I've gone through a few different positions I'm at my second company. And right now I lead training and curriculum development for the Tomahawk Land Attack missile, for the weapon system that launches that missile, and for the planning that goes behind it. So it's a good area to be in. It's not going anywhere.
And it's a very technical area, right? But you're also leading people, you're working with people.
Right. I have a very, very smart and experienced team. So they do all the hard work. I'm just basically a project manager now. So, it's easy. They make it easy.
That sounds good. You're here today to talk about knowledge management. So let's start out with that by just a definition of knowledge management, because it's a term that's been around for a while, for
right.
a couple of decades. But I think there's a lot of different definitions. So how do you define it?
Yes. Well, there were over 100 definitions, and there's some documents out there that show people that they had one group that actually studied the definitions. And my definition, I did it because the easiest one I could think of. And so I created it, and I call it, knowledge management is knowing what to do with the information you have. So when you have the information, either to share it, to transfer it, to document it, to put it somewhere where people can find it, where your company is going to store it. But basically what you do with the information you have.
And it's a very important field and an important thing to think about, because we're all creating knowledge. We're all creating information all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Excuse my dog.
That's okay.
And that may be the first time she's actually barked on the podcast. For those of you who are regular listeners, that's a first. All right. So I hope. So we're all creating knowledge all the time. We're learning as we go, and particularly when we're practicing lean, it's all about, learning things.
Yes.
It's about solving problems. When we solve a problem, we've learned something about the problem. We've learned something about how we solved it. We've learned something about the solution. And a lot of times I know that just, figuring out what to do with that information afterwards is where people get stuck, like right at the point where the knowledge is created. So yes. What are you recommending for that?
Well, there's a lot of things. First, document it like any process improvement. When you figure out what works, document it, write it down. but you have to update it. You have to let people know that it's there. When you outbrief people, have people involved. Don't just outbrief the top people, the C-suite or your boss. Make sure people are there that participate in it. Also write up best practices, because best practices, they share what didn't go right, because not everything goes perfectly. And so then you can work with that. You assign certain aspects to it, whether you tag it, you meta tag it so that it comes up in your documentation on your shared drive. Or if you are old fashioned, use a paper filing system, have it, think of Dewey Decimal Systems back when we were kids. We could find anything with those numbers, but nowadays, it's all electronic. So it's easier to find. So you may have keywords you look for. But, you do have to start with documenting it and recognizing that sometimes not everybody documents everything, explicitly. So you have to have that tacit knowledge or that experiential know-how, and you have to actually talk to people. So I always recommend talking to people and getting people to come talk to you before you start a new project, because they may have done something very similar to it, or they may have done the same thing just years before you did. And
yeah,
so that's worked.
That tacit knowledge. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because, I think that, for those of us who are in continuous improvement, who are in, have worked in the area of procedural documentation, you're going to write down, as you said, if something works, you're going to write down it in some way. You're going to document it, hopefully put it somewhere where it's findable, perhaps even tell people that they should look at it before they start doing a similar process. But the tacit knowledge is, to me, that's always been something that is really hard to manage, because it's so situational. So I like what you said about, talk to people, but people aren't always available to talk to. So then what do we do? Maybe somebody's moved on. Maybe they don't want to talk to you. How do we handle that? And
that I've had people that, in fact, I have somebody I work with that doesn't like to share what he knows, and he's very, very much does his own thing. And so my plan is, because we're getting ready to hire somebody else for the company I work for, and my plan is to make him the mentor. Make him, so he can grow and show somebody else what he knows, but also it gives him the capability to learn how to pass that tacit knowledge on to somebody else, because because he works software and system administration. So when he's working it, he's getting guidance on paper from somebody else about how to do installation of something. And he doesn't explain it to anybody. So he's been doing this for so long that he just insists on doing himself. He comes to work early when nobody else is there and does the work. And so my plan is to pair him up with somebody when we hire that new person and have a mentor, because I think he's a great mentor. He just doesn't get the opportunities because everybody else is experienced. And, so you want to think about that. It's kind of like when I was in the military, we did these things called pass downs. And every time somebody would take the watch, we'd have to arrive a half hour early, and we'd have to go over all things that happened during the watch. And so we had some things we wrote down, and then some things we actually spoke about. We had to talk about certain things every time. So if you think about when, say, in a manufacturing plant, when you have different shifts come on and they have to tell you how many widgets they made or what they did or what problems they had, that's passing tacit knowledge there. And eventually that becomes new tacit knowledge or creating new knowledge, because they fix things or things have happened when they had to stop a line or something like that. And that way that knowledge gets not only passed, but it eventually becomes explicit. But at that point, it's just experiential, and you can do storytelling, or you have a standard way of just doing business. And if you think about project management, you have your stand-ups. And I know stand-ups are not strictly for project management, but they talk about them all the time as if they are. So let's go, just with stand-ups. Stand-up meetings, people don't sit there and pull out all these documents. They just talk. So that's some ways you can pass tacit knowledge or even create it.
Wow. So what you're saying is, and it sounds so simple, Cindy, but it's so big. What you're saying is talk to people.
Yes.
Right? But also have a time and a place when that is supposed to happen, right? It's making the space for it to happen. And and I know they do this in hospitals where nurses will take a report before they start their shift, and just hand on what happened over the last shift, what problems occurred. But the thing that occurred to me as you were talking about it is like, what a fabulous opportunity then to really identify problems, which again in lean is what we want to do. We want to see the problems. So if you're talking to someone who taking over for someone who has completed a shift or was working yesterday when you weren't working, and they say this thing happened, and you go, well, that's interesting, that thing happened. If it happens again, now you have that opportunity to start recognizing the problem and and putting it out there as a problem that needs to be addressed, instead of just being, well, it was a one-time thing that happened and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, and we know when people storytell that they generally remember the storytelling more than they remember the document they read. Storytelling is a lot more interesting, and it can bring people together too. So that builds on knowledge sharing. And so when they come to you and say, "Hey, I got something to tell you," it's not just gossip or whatever they're telling you. They might tell you that, "Hey, I figured this out. This is what we're going to do, or this is what we can do, or this saved us money." Or, hey, I found out talking to this person in the break area, this person did this at their last job, and this is what they did. So there's a lot of opportunities to pass that, but you do have to talk to people. And when I work, I have an office, it's all the way, we're all in the same room, and I call it an office, but the walls don't go all the way up to the top and the door doesn't shut. It's such an old building. But, I sit all the way at the end, and my entire team is either down in the lab working, or they're in their areas all the way down the other end of the building. And so I get up and I go talk to them. I check my emails in the morning. I get there early, I check my emails. And when they come in, I go talk to them and see how they're doing and check on things. And it's a lot easier than sending emails, because you get to hear things. You can ask follow-up questions. You don't have a million emails you got to track either. So,
right. And you could also listen for, well, how does this really sound when the person is telling the story? Are they really worried? Is it, what's the, there's probably some not even sort of tacit knowledge, but just some subtext that you could also pick up on when you do that. When a lot of people are working remote or working in a distributed environment, and my last job in a corporation, I was working with people who were literally, the 12-hour time zone difference. And one of the things that happens in that kind of environment is you get this sort of back to back meetings that happen, usually over Zoom or Skype or something like that. And it feels like there's no time for those types of conversations. People talk about, we don't have the water cooler anymore. What's your advice for people who are living that work lifestyle?
Well, again, when I was in the military, we had this thing called a battle rhythm. And the battle rhythm is a way of setting up meetings so you have time to make decisions before the next meeting comes. But you also have to purposely put breaks in there, because you can't expect everybody to be able to think if they're all they're thinking about is I have to go to the bathroom or I have to eat something, that's simple. But also you got to have time for them to take action on what they have going on. If they've been tasked with something in one meeting, how are they going to take action on it if you don't give them a break? There is, you got to look at the time zones. Time zones aren't going anywhere. We work with some people in the UK, and right now there's 6-hour time difference, or 5, I forget. But it's a big chunk of time. I get emails from them when I come in the morning, and if I don't email them right away, they're gone, and I don't get anything till next day. And so, it makes Friday a non-doable day. So, what we do is we just do our best to work where we can take changes, but we also do a lot of stuff via email so that we're not constantly in meetings. I have my most meetings on Mondays, which I think is a horrible day to have meetings, because you never know what comes up over the weekend. And so my meetings on Monday, they start at 9:00 and they go to like 3. And it just drives me crazy. I don't get anything done except for emails. And, but the rest of the week, our company, thank goodness our company has a rule, no meetings on Fridays. And so only if our customer sets up a meeting do we have to go. But, my customers mainly up in Northern Virginia, so I don't have to go anywhere, but it all works.
So, but what you're saying though, and I'm thinking about this concept of leader standard work, that it really is an opportunity in creating the standard work for the leader, that the leader is setting that rhythm for the rest of the organization so that they have time for, as you said, time to take action, but also time to deal with managing their knowledge, time to write things down, time to tell someone else a story, time to mentor somebody.
Yes.
Because if you're not creating that rhythm for people and allowing for that time, then in my experience, knowledge management is one of the first things that goes out the window. Yes, people will write down a procedure because that's what they're supposed to do, but the tacit knowledge just gets completely lost.
Yeah. And when people do decide to share that type of knowledge on a phone call or on a Zoom call or Teams call, it makes the meeting go extremely long and makes people stop listening. It's miserable.
Exactly. Yeah. So the field of knowledge management, when I first heard of it, I think you and I talked about this before. It was a couple of decades ago, and I remember being very excited about it because of just the idea that we were finally going to take care of what we were learning. And what I kind of see happen is there's like a whole section of the business world that still is not paying attention to it, and then the other people are taking it in the direction of data science and artificial intelligence. And what you're talking about, Cindy, which is the tacit knowledge, the people-to-people knowledge, I don't hear as much about that. So I was wondering if you could just speak on where you see the field of knowledge management right now.
Well, I think that technology, the people are very excited about this chat GCP or
GPT.
That's
chat
it.
GPT. Yeah.
Yes, I can see it in my head, just can't quite come out the right way. But yeah, I see people very excited about that. Machine learnings, people talk about AI, RPA and ML together, robotic process automation, machine learning and artificial intelligence. But, they know how expensive it is. And so I see that tacit knowledge gets left behind because they're like, oh, that time it takes to people talk, that eats up a lot of time. And those are dollars that we can't get back, but we can save all the money with using technology. And I think technology is great. I wouldn't be here without technology, but I really believe in people. People are the ones that make the decisions with the technology. People are the ones that determine what they want their technology to do. They decide what technology they want to have, and what the purpose of it is. And so I think the return on investment is very much strong in human-centric knowledge management. But when people look at manpower and hours and just they try to make it into dollars. And what they don't realize is that if you don't have the human-centric knowledge management, you're going to lose people, because people are not going to feel trusted. They're not going to feel trusted because you're not talking to them and you're keeping them like that mushroom in the dark. And you got to take care of your people. Machines are going to be there for, they're not going to go anywhere, but I can quit today and go somewhere else.
Right.
Right. And I think that you need to look at that as all your people. You hired a person because they know something, not because they can hit a button. I mean, maybe because they understand how to hit that button, but they also understand a lot of the stuff that comes before that.
Yeah, they know something, and they can continue to learn things in all sorts of different interesting ways, right? So you're hiring a whole person. You're not just hiring someone who can type on a keyboard or read code or whatever it is.
Yeah, if you think about how the stores are going, like my nieces work at Walmart, and I absolutely hate Walmart. And I'm sorry, Walmart, that's how I feel. But the only reason I really detest it is because when you go through the lines, they rely so much on those automatic tellers, or the automatic checkouts where you have to do your checkout. You're still got a person doing it, and you're not saving any money by doing that, other than people that you're not paying to demand things. The problem comes really when the person who's checking out has a problem, or they have a wrong price. They don't have a person to talk to, and there's not enough people there to take care of all those people who are spending their money. And so that's where I see people are getting more reliant on the technology and not thinking about the people in the process. If you think about rework, how many times are you going to have somebody, okay, I'm going to have to go reshell this because the person decided that the price wasn't right, and so they're not going to get it. So how much time does that take to have that person go and put it back on the shelf? Or how many people do you have to hire to work overnight to make sure everything gets cleaned up because people didn't have somebody to talk to, so they just left their stuff in place? It's not just Walmart. It's happening a lot of different places.
Yeah, I know there's a supermarket chain in the Midwest that is planning to get rid of almost all their cashiers.
Yeah.
And got 100% automated. But they still have to have people, right? Because of what you pointed out, which is that the technology is still not good enough for it to be mistake proof. And in fact, I had this happen the other day. I was buying bananas and checking out somewhere where they had the machine. I put the bananas down on the scale. The machine read the barcode that was on the bananas and weighed them, but the bananas kind of bounced, and so it did it 3 times. So then somebody had to come over and take two sets of bananas off my bill. So that was a delay. So it looked faster, but it really wasn't faster. Yeah, it was just.
I mean,
at least
if they look at the time they spent, the total time, and then take away, take all that work they had to put in there to fix it because the process wasn't quite what they expected.
Yeah. So people still count.
Yes, very much so.
That's the bottom line. So, Cindy, you've written a Knowledge Management Memory Jogger. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, I just happen to have one here.
You happen to have one, and so for those of you, maybe hold it up a little. Yeah, it's going in.
Two sizes.
It says the Knowledge Management Memory Jogger. It comes in 2 sizes.
Yeah, so, it comes in a pocket guide and a 5x7 for people like me who need better things to see.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So, why do I need a Knowledge Management Memory Jogger?
Well, it talks about this memory jogger I wrote to support organization and individuals. And this has 10 different departments that you'd see in a business. It has stuff like business development, finance, supply, and it goes through knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, knowledge creation, knowledge storage, and knowledge findability. And so how all those apply, but it's really to help the organizations be able to get rid of those silos. It's meant to encourage people to talk to each other, to have somebody talk and tell what they know, and then maybe sit with somebody in supply. So say you have a person in finance and person in supply. Person in finance understands what supply has spent or where their money goes. And maybe you got a new person in supply and they are just ordering parts because they're afraid that they won't get them in time, or they're afraid that they need more than they really do, or for some reason, but they understand, the finance person understands the spending habits and the spending, what's actually happened because they've been there longer. So they have that knowledge. And so the supply guy's like, why am I not getting my parts? What's going on? Why can't I get parts? Why are you putting this rule on me that I can't get them? And so the two of them can talk, and they can get a mutual understanding. And then eventually that silo goes away for their 2 organizations because they know that they can work together. And then, you can work that also with the other departments. But so go through that. That's one of the chapters. And there's also a chapter about different people in the knowledge organizations. And you don't have to call your knowledge managers anything. You don't even have to say that they're knowledge managers, because knowledge management really applies to everybody. So there's also short guides in there, but there's also a lot of tips on how to do knowledge management sharing or transfer. So training sessions, brainstorming, gamification. You could do, my company does these scavenger hunts, for like ethics things. Yeah. So we have to go through our website. We have an internal website. We go through that, and they have prizes, and you can have prizes for your organizations. And they don't have to be a lot of money. You can have lunch and learns where you either have guest speakers, or you have somebody in one department sharing with other departments a success that you had, and things that you did, and things that maybe you failed on previously and you were able to overcome those. Those are just little things about knowledge management. And when people ask about having a knowledge management program, they think money right away.
Right. I think a really big days and a whole bunch of people hired to edit a wiki, but it sounds expensive, right?
Right. It does. And it doesn't have to be. You can just get somebody who can be a sponsor and have interest in it. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to have somebody think of knowledge management as a collateral. It's not a collateral duty. It's something that's got to happen day in and day out. That you manage knowledge. You don't keep it to yourself. Because a lot of people keep it to themselves because they're afraid somebody else will get the job before them, or they'll come off as a smart guy, and the other guy will come off as the smarter guy. So it's a lot of people. You got to get people to understand that knowledge is power, but sharing is powerful.
Yeah. And which is in a lot of places, that is a bit countercultural, right? And yeah. I'm wondering too, there's so much mobility right now. We had the Great Resignation, and then sort of the Great Switch around. You were referring to that earlier. Everybody hopping off one place and going to another place. So people are coming in. They need the benefit of the knowledge that's already created in the organization they're coming into, and at the same time, I wonder if some of them are like, well, I've got to show myself to be like the smartest person in the room. So if I know something, is it safe to collaborate here? Will I continue being respected if I share that knowledge, if I'm not the one holding on to it? So again, I think my thought about it is that it really has to be up to the leaders again to create that culture that says, yes, it's important, and yes, you should be talking to each other.
Yeah, and it should be part of your organizational culture. So in your organization, they have to accept it, and they have to implement it. They have to show, our CEO, he every week he does a weekly video for us. And, because our company is about 44,000 people. And
wow.
it's a lot of people, they're global. So, he puts out a video, and, I don't know how his communications team does this, but they manage to get everything done. And every week it looks like it's professionally done. It's great. It has music. It's nice, but
wow.
It shows us what's happening outside of our little area in Virginia Beach. So, it's good to have that. And then we also have programs. We have our employee readiness groups that are really helpful. And, we have different types of people that talk, and different things we're doing. So, that really is great for me, because that's kind of thing I like. When I was in the military, knowledge management, it was part of the culture, because you never knew when somebody was going to get sent off to support a different task or get transferred. You had some sort of idea, but an officer could be there anywhere between a year and a half to 3 years, and your enlisted could be there as long as 5 years. And so if something happens where they get sick, or if a woman gets pregnant and she has to get transferred off the ship, or if somebody gets sent off to an IA, where they had to go to Afghanistan or Iraq, that would mean they come off your ship and you don't get a replacement for that. So, you constantly have to be in a mode of sharing knowledge and doing pass downs and writing stuff down. So
that's really an excellent idea, right? To like, we all want to, I think many people want to sort of imagine that everything, I'm going to be at this place for a long time, everybody else is going to be here. But if you are really committed to the mission of the organization, even if, you probably should be imagining, hey, if I was not going to be here, if, if so-and-so got promoted, so-and-so left the company, what would we need to know that they know, because we all care about the mission of this organization? That would be a great way to think, right?
And I wrote a post on LinkedIn about, my first position at my first company, after I retired, and they had, we worked with other companies there, and one of the companies had somebody die right there on site. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, after everything, after like the first weeks, when people had, started going through the acceptance phase and all that stuff, they started asking, what was he doing? What was he working on? Because he was a software coder, and so that took a while for them to figure out what all he was doing, because they're not going to have his passwords. We don't share passwords. That right, is something you shouldn't share. Shouldn't share passwords. And so eventually they figured out what he was doing. But, you have to plan. I always tell people, what happens if you get hit by a bus? And I do use that all the time, because it's so true. What happens if you get hit by a bus? I had somebody, his son got sick yesterday, and so he had to stay home. And that took him out of the lab. But, we have people that talk to each other about what they're doing, so they're able to work with that. It's just, you just got to be flexible too.
Yeah. Could you take us through, you talked about some of the different types of knowledge, and one term that caught my ear was fungible knowledge. Tell us about that.
Oh, I didn't talk about fungible knowledge.
You did? What did you say?
I said knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, knowledge capture, knowledge sharing, and knowledge findability.
Oh, findability. Well, let's talk about findability, because I think that is a problem.
Yeah, well, findability, it's just like it sounds. It's how do you locate it? Some people have, if you put it on a shared drive, do people have access to it? First of all, have you gone to, have you been on a SharePoint portal where you've gone to access something and it says you don't have permissions and state why you want permissions, and you're like, why do I have to ask permission to do my job? And sometimes it's because people don't realize that you need access to it. They don't realize that you've been hired, or that you are doing this and you've been given an extra task. But if you think about the Dewey Decimal System, and I always tell people librarians are the best knowledge managers, because because they're always having to find stuff. And there's actually some librarian jobs that are called knowledge managers or knowledge workers, but they're the ones that when we were kids we went to, and they would tell us exactly where to find the book or the cassette tape that we were looking for, or the microfiche. It's just about how can you locate what you need when you need it. So because we'll eventually find it if we look hard enough, but if it's not accessible, or if it's not a logical way of thinking for your company, you're not going to find it.
Yeah. So this is where I think knowledge management kind of goes beyond what you've been talking about of people talking to people, sharing their knowledge, doing that the human to human, but it really does take some additional special skills, I think, to help an organization organize these things in the way they should be. But it also takes breaking down silos, right? Because if somebody comes into the organization, as you said, and they need access to certain files, certain pieces of information to do their job, somebody has got to be able to keep track of where that information is, which pieces of it should be available, and make that knowledge available to the person who's going to be setting the new employee up in the system, so that the new employee doesn't have to go and run into all of those brick walls all on their own. And that really is, I think, where we're starting to talk about is the professional knowledge managers, the people who really are, getting more into the information science side of it. Which is, I think, is going to continue to be a really interesting and growing career field.
Yeah. And I always tell people it's not just about knowing where the files are, but if you think about the TV show WKRP in Cincinnati, remember Jennifer Marlowe? She was a hub of everything. She knew everything that was going on through Arthur Carlson. And I apologize for your younger listeners who don't know what that show is. But when I was a kid, that was the show to watch at night. But Jennifer Marlowe knew everything. She was, the secretary, the receptionist, but she knew everybody who was getting what trouble. She even knew what her boss's mom was thinking, the owner of the radio station. So, everybody wants to be that Jennifer Marlowe, and they need to be. They need to learn how to talk to each other too, in order to get past, people who are possessive about their knowledge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, which is, I don't know that we always value those folks the way we should, right?
Right.
But the administrator who does know exactly, how these things work, how does this system work, and how do you how do you get hold of that person? How do you get on this person's calendar? Those kinds of things. And
really the executive assistants are the most powerful people, I think.
Yeah.
They really are.
That's true. That's really true. Yeah. So in thinking about knowledge management as being a core competency of an organization, where do you see when an organization starts to realize that, where do they usually place the sort of quote unquote knowledge managers? Is it IT? Is it somewhere else?
I've seen it in IT, but also when I became a knowledge manager, as one of my jobs at my last company, I actually was there supporting a government person. And so they assigned me to, a couple groups. And so I had to set up meetings with all the stakeholders in different groups, have them get together and talk about everything that they were doing, because they had a common area. I had 5 different commands. They were regional maintenance centers. And in each of these commands, they had similar jobs. So what I had to do is I had to invite all these people. So I had to research and find out who was at what place. I had a government sponsor who was the lead, and they would trust me enough that they said, yeah, go out and send out the emails. They never really, in fact, never had the time to look at any of our knowledge managers. And so we had different groups, and we would get them together, and sometimes we'd even run the call. And that was very interesting, because then I learned more, and I was able to talk to my boss, my government boss, not my company boss, but my government boss, and pass on what I did. And then she would explain to me, because I had a couple, but I had one woman, she explained everything to me when I say, oh, I don't really understand what this meant. And she'd tell me. And so I learned more where, when she was absent, I could do what I could do as a contractor, but I couldn't task anybody, but I could basically go through the agenda, and I had to write agendas and everything. But that was the only time that I wasn't in, that they weren't talking about KM as far as an IT aspect. So, you
were like a sort of an ambassador between your company and the government client. Is that right? So you were.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a contractor, so I had my statement of work, and that's what I supported. I supported 2 phases of the maintenance modernization cycle. So that was, important. And I had other people I had to work with that were in the other phases. So, there was a couple different, groups of stakeholders that I had to work with. And so our group, my company's group, we'd always get together every week and talk about what's going on with our stuff. And we'd include them in all our emails, so that they saw what traffic was going back and forth between us.
Wow. So tell us again about the memory jogger. So is that out now? Is it available for folks to buy?
It is. If you go to Gold QPC, they have all the Lean Six Sigma memory joggers. They have project management memory joggers. They have Risk. Hugh Alley is the one that got me introduced to his editor, and that's the editor that accepted my work. And so, he's got his TWI memory jogger just came out, and so it's very easy to get. You can buy the 5x7 version, you can buy the pocket guide, or you can buy the digital version. But digital version, you can go online and mark it up there. But it's not like having a Nook or a Kindle.
Okay,
but,
so we'll have the links to get the memory jogger in the show notes.
Okay, thank you
for everybody. Cindy, how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk more about this or learn more about knowledge management?
They can email me at cjyoung@cjyoungconsulting.com, because I have my business as opposed to working my full-time job.
Yeah.
And then you can also go to my website and click my email there. I'm on LinkedIn every day, and I'm on Instagram.
She is. I can attest to that. Cindy is on LinkedIn every day. Yes, and I love
LinkedIn. And then I'm occasionally on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But if you see a post on Twitter from me, it's generally because I clicked the button on LinkedIn that says LinkedIn and Twitter.
Oh, okay. All right. So but there's lots of ways to get get in touch with you and have a further conversation about knowledge management or about anything else that we've talked about. Hey, Cindy, tell me, what would be your one piece of advice for a young person starting out?
I would say get to know people you work with and what they do. Walk around and talk to them, introduce yourself, and don't sit in your cubicle all the time. But talk to your people you work with, because eventually you'll want to do something different, and you'll want to know what's out there and what's worth doing.
So start your knowledge management early and connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What great advice. Wow.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Cindy Young, thank you so much for traveling with me to the edges of Lean. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Erin Whalen for being my guest on the Edges of Lean. What did you learn from this conversation? What ideas did it spark? We would love to hear from you. Find Erin at compassionatecoaching.org or on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com, or comment wherever you watch or listen. Don't forget to subscribe and tell a friend about the Edges of Lean. Please join me in exploring more of the Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.